Blessings and peace to you. This is SB Favor Thinking Podcast, and my name is SB Favor. How are you doing today? It is Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021. Another wonderful day and another day to be thankful. Can you believe we are in the beginning of November? This year is almost over. Time is just moving too fast. But I hope everyone did have a wonderful day. I am on the East Coast, so it's evening time here. And I want to remind you to focus on what is good, because as I always say, if you focus on what is good, then you can project something good to happen. So make sure you focus on what is good. Your thought life can become your reality. So focus on what is good. You can do no wrong, only good when you focus on what is good. I also would like to remind you, if you would like to give to the podcast, you can give at $ at SB Favor at Cash App. I appreciate your donations so much, and thank you in advance. Jaki Draper is here this evening, and we are going to discuss bitterness, unresolved unforgiveness. Bitterness is something that has to do with a person's attitude. It's resentment. Sadly, it can be something that someone is triggered by, something they see, hear, based upon something they experienced in their past. Bitterness is anger. It can be a part of anger. People sometimes can become bitter because they feel that they've been treated unfairly, which, as I stated, it stems from unforgiveness. Because if you think about something long enough, if you think about something pertaining to hurt, something in your past, sadly, if you don't forgive the hurt, the wrong that's been done to you, then that hurt becomes anger, and then that anger can become bitterness, which can also turn into hatred. And that's pretty deep. So me and Jackie are going to talk about the do's and the don'ts of all of it. And I hope that you are encouraged, listeners. How you doing, Jackie?
I'm doing wonderful. I had a very nice day today. It's beautiful here in the fall.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's nice.
Yeah, I'm on the road this week, so I'm in Virginia Beach, and it's chilly. It's nice, but it's chilly here. It gets a little chilly everywhere this time of the year, right? So,
yep, even in Florida.
Yeah, even in Florida.
But chilly to me in Florida is not exactly chilly to other people.
Yeah, compared to further north in New Jersey and New York, because that's where I'm from. Yes, it's cold. It's cold. It's chilly cold. But we're going to talk about bitterness. So, Jackie, I just ran the idea across you through a text earlier today, to just talk about what we were going to discuss here tonight. And so what do you think about when bitterness comes to mind?
I think about people holding on to a bad feeling of anger. And I personally, thank God, I don't have any experience in this myself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I do have experience in witnessing it in people that I know.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say my most common way that I've experienced friends of mine with the bitterness is divorce.
Wow.
And I feel like a lot of times people just don't want to let go of,
mm-hmm.
not that they don't want to let go of the marriage or the person, but the pain that the divorce caused, or the pain the marriage caused,
mm-hmm.
and it makes that person bitter.
Yeah, I haven't actually experienced being bitter. I think that when I was much younger, I think I experienced, harboring unforgiveness, which I think could have turned into bitterness. But I think as I examined myself at that time when I experienced that unforgiveness, I was just holding stuff in my heart against people that done things to me that of course, that was hurtful. I held it against them so much that I held it within myself, because unforgiveness can literally sit in the body. And I know some people probably don't even understand that, but bitterness and unforgiveness, hatred is something that becomes a part of your body, and I say that because when I was harboring the unforgiveness in my life, my attitude was a little rigid sometimes. And I started asking myself, why? Why is my attitude so rigid? And so, when I started praying more, it was revealed to me, through my prayer life that I was harboring some unforgiveness. And so I started doing the work to forgive those that hurt me. But bitterness is so much deeper because first it starts with being hurt. And then if the person doesn't forgive and they keep that unforgiveness, then it can go into deep bitterness. And that bitterness, as I stated a minute ago, it can literally become a part of your body. You ever see somebody just sick all the time, Jackie?
Yes, absolutely.
Sick. Go ahead.
You see it in them. You just see the coloring of their facial expression, their posture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They just look, even when they're supposedly happy, you can see that something's wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Or the person that's bitter, they're mad all the time at something, somebody, all the time. You never really get to see them happy. And then when you actually see them happy, you're just like, wow, they're happy today. It's like an event to see them happy. Right? Isn't that crazy?
I have found that people like this, their point of view, they see things sometimes real, but sometimes imagined in a way that they are not. In all of the negative light, they can't see the positive. It prevents them from even being able to pull the positive out of it. It's very sad.
Yeah, it's very sad. And that bitterness doesn't have to be there. If we are exposed to some level of hurt in our life, as individuals, we have a responsibility to care for ourselves, to love ourselves enough to forgive the hurt that was done to us, because forgiveness is for you, listeners. It's for you as an individual. It's for us as individuals. It's not about what the person did, or it's not about allowing them to get away with something or receive a pardon. It's, the forgiveness that we experience is for us, because when we are harmed by something and when we choose to forgive, what happens is inside of your spirit, inside of your body, you create a wellspring of life and liberty that was given to you by God. When you forgive, when you let it go, it's for you and your well-being. And so to hold on to unforgiveness and become bitter, that right there is a deeper level of hurt. When I think about bitterness also, Jackie, I think about, you ever see barren tree branches that grow no leaves and grow no fruit? Yes, that's what I think about when I think about the word bitterness. I think about trees that have no fruit. They're just branches. You ever see branches that are just torn up and barren after a storm? There's just no green on it. It's just barren. You ever see that? Of course.
A dead tree.
A dead tree, yeah.
Yeah. The tree's still standing, but you know that it's dead inside.
Yes.
And it needs to be removed. Those branches are going to fall off and kill you. Just stay away from the tree. But yeah.
Exactly.
It's a dead tree.
It's a dead tree.
It's a shell. It's a shell of a tree.
Yeah.
It needs to be, cut down.
Isn't that something? Cut down because it's of no value. Wow. Right. And so
it's dangerous. In fact, dead trees are dangerous.
Yeah, because they can fall at any time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So bitterness, that's what it represents. It represents disease. Think about that. Disease. Bitterness, it doesn't represent anything good. Uncontrolled anger doesn't represent anything good. Resentment, harboring resentment, it doesn't represent anything good. And all of those things come from unforgiveness. That's what it comes from. I mean, when we choose to forgive, we are opening ourselves up to a wellspring of life, which is something that's given by God. Think about a reservoir. You see how freely it flows, and it gives fresh water to wherever the fresh water flows. When a person is walking around with unforgiveness, fresh water, freshness in the spirit, it can't run through that person. It's sewage. Unforgiveness is sewage. I always say that, Jackie, because that's what it reminds me of.
Right.
You know, so tell me about another observation you may have seen, Jackie, when it comes to that bitterness or unforgiveness that we're talking about.
Well, I would say that the biggest characteristic of people that I've known that have had this are them replaying their story over and over, retelling their hurt, giving it, detail over and over, hearing the same story every time something reminds them of the situation. And I'm certainly not against it if you have a bad situation, talking about it and retelling your story from time to time to work through your pain and to get on the other side. But when someone is enthralled in their bitterness, they're looking for support. They're looking for your buy-in. They're looking for you to feed their anger and to push it deeper within.
Yes. And they will also...
They're perpetuating all this pain. They want to sit around and talk about it all the time instead of trying to see. And also, they reject when you try to show them another side of it.
Right.
Well,
yeah, they get upset with you.
They reject it. Yeah, they get upset with you. You're not on my side. You don't understand. You agree with that other person.
Right.
Things like that.
Yeah, and you're just telling them the truth so that they can see what they need to see to get free. Right. Right,
exactly.
That's a victimization attitude. That's a person with a victim-like attitude. They don't want to take on the attitude of being an overcomer or a conqueror or someone that is courageous. They don't want to take on that attitude. They want to take on the victimization attitude. They did this to me. They hurt me. Why they do this to me? But this is what they did. Yes, okay.
Right.
We all been hurt. We all have experienced some type of disappointment. We've all been betrayed on some level, right?
Right.
But in the process of it all, when something happens, the question that we have to ask ourselves is this: should I carry this around? Should I carry this bag of hurt and this unforgiveness around like a bag, like a luggage? Ask yourself that question, listeners. Should I carry this hurt, this disappointment, this betrayal? Should I carry it around like a luggage? Should I carry it around like it's a bag on my shoulder? No, you shouldn't. You're supposed to sit that bag down and let it go and walk away from it and never return to it again. If something reminds you of the time you were hurt, just shift your thoughts into another area and tell yourself. Go ahead, Jackie. Go ahead.
I was going to say that I find that a lot of times people will redefine themselves as like how you're saying the victim, like I am this person. I am this person who was wronged, or I am this person who was abused, or I'm using the word abuse lightly. I meant like in their whatever situation they're in. But they redefine themselves as this person, this victim.
Yes.
And like you're saying, they carry around this luggage. It's like that's who they are now. And
right.
You don't have to be that person. It just
no.
I don't understand why do you choose that? Why are you choosing to be this angry, upset person?
Right.
You're living in this muck. Why would you choose that? Who would? I don't understand it myself.
And that's why I'm saying, once you recognize you have that bag of hurt, that bag of disappointment, that bag of betrayal you've been carrying, listeners, once you recognize you've been in that space, Let it go. I had to tell myself, Jackie, I am not going to return to this place in my thoughts. I'm not going to return to that place in my thoughts. I first accept what was done to me, right? That's how you forgive.
Mm-hmm.
I accept what was done, number one. I confronted what was done. I accepted it. And then once I accepted it, I said to myself, now I have to love myself not to dwell in it. And three, I had to take on new thoughts about it. So every time I seen the person, I had to develop a different perception about who that person is, regardless of what they did. Now, of course, you're going to always have memories about things that happen, but the key factor is this: do not rehearse the hurt. Don't rehearse it. It's simple as that. I think sometimes when people are talking about it over and over and over again, as you stated, Jackie, I think that makes it harder sometimes.
Right.
Because some people, every opportunity,
they're reliving it.
Yeah, and they
reliving it every time.
Exactly, and they talk about it every opportunity that they get because they feel like they're trying to validate that this person is their anger, and they want to validate this person is so wrong. They just wrong. Right. We know that
I'm good, they're bad.
Exactly, and we know that whoever hurt us, we know that they're wrong. But once again, forgiveness is for you. I have another episode that talks about that. Forgiveness is for you. It's an inspirational quote. And when we love ourselves and we take on that self-care attitude, guess what? You won't want to rehearse the hurt. You won't. You won't want to be a part of it. Even in your thought life, you would tell yourself, I'm not even going to focus on that. Also, Jackie, bitterness accumulates over time when people don't practice forgiveness. Isn't that something?
Yeah. Yes.
It doesn't happen overnight. So for the person to become bitter, they have to constantly think about the hurt, Jackie. I'm talking about they thinking about it 24/7.
Right.
Because that bitterness is not a surface thing. The bitterness it has depth in the spirit, depth in a person's soul, depth in their spirit, that bitterness. And so in order for that person to really get free from that bitterness, they got to take on a whole different new way of thinking about what happened to them, because that victim attitude, it'll just keep a person down. It'll just keep them down. I worked around people that would just, this was years ago, they would just come in the office early in the morning, just mad. And I'm saying, what are they mad about early in the morning? I said to myself, I'm sitting at my desk like, well, what is it to be mad about so early? Wow, what is going on? And so, of course, without judging or anything, I would just pray for the person. Seriously, I would just be like, Lord, just give them peace, give them joy, God, please. Sometimes you could be driving down the street or in the public at a grocery store or something. You might come in contact with a bitter person, and all of a sudden they'll just start screaming over nothing. Like the smallest thing, they'll just start screaming. But guess what? Those of us that know better, when you see somebody that you do better, and when you see somebody that's like that, sometimes you just, sometimes you can't clap back, as they would say. You can't, just scream because they're screaming, because that's not a good thing to do. Sometimes if you see somebody that's in that place of bitterness and anger and resentment, it's a cry for help. Actually, Jackie, do you believe that? It's a cry for help?
I think, there could be some elements of crying for help. Mm-hmm. I think they more are crying for support, and they want your buy-in. They want you to stand by them and rally them on in their pain. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Eat it.
Yeah. I've seen someone that...
Because I've tried to help, and they don't want my help.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about that kind, the kind of person that you are trying to help them in their pride. they don't want to let it go. They are determined not to let it go. So yeah, that kind of person, you really just have to leave them to themselves. And when you see them, just be nice to them, but you really can't press the issue, because then they'll flip the script on you.
Yeah. I just have to remove myself from the situation.
Yeah. But for that person that could be dealing with unforgiveness in their heart, and it may be struggling with bitterness, that person that's crying out for help, that person, Jackie, I've seen that person. That person is humble, but they don't have anybody to help them to get out of that space. And maybe the people that they did speak to, they were so harsh on them. They didn't show them compassion, or they probably didn't even give them good advice. So the person that I experienced that was crying out for help, I listened to what the person had to say. And instead of criticizing them in the conversation, I just continued to listen. And then I tried to help that person to understand that they have to love themselves to let it go. So as I repeated that over and over, I also mentioned to them that they have to will to move forward. And, in that conversation, they listened. We hung up with absolute peace. They didn't freak out on me or anything like that. But I just, I reminded them that as you move forward from hurt, as you move forward from the things that harmed your spirit, as you move forward from the things that disappointed you, what happens is you open yourself up to something better and something new. I just believe that, because I'm telling you, Jackie, some things happened to me in my past, and I was just walking around with a little rigid attitude, just a little rigid attitude. I wasn't bitter, but I had a rigid attitude, and a lot of people are walking around dealing with bitterness and resentment and anger, and they don't even know it. They don't even know that they are actually dealing with it on that level until somebody actually show it to them, because
I think that's the fair statement. I think a lot of people are not conscious of their feelings.
Yeah. They're not, unfortunately, none of us can be healed if we harbor past hurts. We can't be healed, and we have to be mindful of that. If I ask myself the question, how can I be a better person? How can I be a better mother, a better sister, a better neighbor? If I ask myself those questions, I have to first accept what has happened in my life, bad, good, and indifferent. I have to accept it. And once you accept it, you have to tell yourself, now you got to move past it. Because if you don't accept it, if you stand in a place of denial, I can't believe they did this to me. Well, guess what? You're going to keep rehearsing it. And you don't want to do that. You want to do that. You don't want to do that. Being wounded is like walking around bleeding. That's how I see it, Jackie. It's like walking around bleeding. And whenever the person gets the opportunity to spill their hurt onto somebody else, they do it by showing other people their bitterness, by showing other people their resentment. And it's not fair, because if you was in a marriage or a relationship and now you're with someone new and something triggers you, is it fair for that new person to experience something from your past? That's not fair either, Jackie, right? It's so we got to do better, and we got to be healed, was there a time in your life, Jackie, where you did the work on yourself in a specific area where you knew that you was healed and you overcame what happened to you? Because when something happens, we could sit in that moment and get stuck too,
My life is a series of fixing myself. It's constant.
Yeah.
I've always been a person that is aware of myself and my emotions and the people around me. I was very fortunate to be raised by a man who is similar in that state. So my father was he's religious, very all about Jesus, all about the Bible. So, which is very helpful as a child in the sense, my father wasn't one of those, he is religious because he's Catholic, but not religious in the sense that he was very regimented on rules. He was more about Jesus and what Jesus had to say and how Jesus, to interpret this way and that way. So when people, as a small child, when someone did something, my dad would, talk to my dad about it. He's like, well, you should feel sorry for them. You don't know what's happening in their home. Maybe they didn't mean it. You should just be grateful that you are a strong person and that you can handle this. And that, he would rationalize everything out and also say it in a manner that made me feel like I had the ability to overcome anything.
That's awesome.
So I had a great foundation in that sense, where I try to understand that most people weren't raised that way.
Right.
My mother was not that kind of parent at all,
but
my father was. So fortunately, I had that influence. So I've always been a person who is aware of myself and other people around me, and constant work on myself and constant forgiveness of others in their behavior, because I can't quote the Bible exactly for sure, but he doesn't know what he's doing, whatever that part is that Jesus says, forgive him. He knows not what he's doing.
Yeah.
Because they're in their own awareness. They're in their own environment. Like my dad would always say, you don't know what's going on in their head, in their home, in their life. Feel sorry for them. Don't take it personally, whatever is happening. Yeah. And so it's just something that stuck with me my whole life in situations.
Yeah, we have to recognize, I'm glad you said that, to be aware of yourself, because we have to recognize if we are dealing with that in our life on any level, we have to regenerate our minds. We have to develop a different mindset, because when you keep harboring unforgiveness, which leads to bitterness, what happens is it affects all relationships. It could potentially affect all relationships. It stops you from, as I mentioned earlier, it stops you from having a wellspring of liberty and life in your spirit, which comes from God. It also brings about triggers, which can be unhealthy when you're trying to establish a new relationship. And also it can hinder your relationship with God. And it can also keep you stuck and stop you from growing. And so we have to evaluate ourselves, in my opinion, daily, because that's what I do with myself. I evaluate myself daily throughout the day. I sometimes journal, and I just evaluate myself based upon what is happening. And if I go through something that's hurtful in that moment, I evaluate what I'm thinking and my responses to what is going on, because I don't want to have something in my life that's going to hinder my relationship with God or hinder my relationship with the people that I love. I want new things in my life. And so in order to maintain good things and new things in our life, we have to evaluate those things to make sure we don't have unforgiveness and bitterness. And if you listeners experience somebody or know somebody that is dealing with that, you want to pray for them first and foremost. You don't want to be more critical, because being more critical and telling them you got some bitterness in your life, that's not going to help by just saying it. So you want to be compassionate, because in my opinion, Jackie, I think that people are hurting, and sometimes bitterness, that's what it represents. It represents someone that is hurting. And so
Right.
We got to remember that, listeners. because if you know someone that's close to you in your family, someone in your your friendship circle, you want to make sure you are the one that people can turn to if you really care. You don't want somebody just not being their best self, because we all are in a position to help the next person. So when someone is experiencing that, I believe also, like I said, Jackie, it's also a cry for help. And so I don't want to see people like that. And so I pray for them. And if it's necessary for me to have a conversation, I'm not going to just come out and tell them that, but I will have a conversation so that it is edifying to some level, so that they can understand what they're dealing with, And then sometimes, you know what, Jackie, when we have conversations with people, sometimes they'll just open up to you, and in that moment, that's actually their healing, because they get to open up completely and just be who they are. Because some people may be carrying around bitterness because they've never had the opportunity to release it, right?
Right.
So, it's different levels to different types of healing. But this topic was something I wanted to discuss because I had a conversation with someone earlier in the week, and I listened to everything they said to me in the conversation. I stayed quiet, and I recognized that this individual was dealing with some hurt, which stemmed from bitterness, being bitter. And so my heart went out to them, and of course I prayed for them, and I just showed them compassion. I didn't criticize them and say, oh, you need to let it go, because some of us can be like that too hard. You just need to let it go. We can't be like that all the time.
I probably am like that. Let that shit go.
No, we can't, not all the time. I think it's a time and place for everything. And when you are really trying to listen to someone and help them, you don't want to be critical like that. You want to really appropriate what is necessary. So, but this is a topic I think that we all can benefit from, in terms of just being reminded of the dangers of what bitterness does, the dangers of resentment, harboring hurt, keeping it inside, rehearsing it in your head. We need to be reminded that it's dangerous, because you do want a wellspring of life in your spirit, listeners. That wellspring of life, it comes from God. It's a newness. It's a good energy. It's a good source of energy. And it's mixed with a spirit of love, a spirit of peace, and a spirit of joy. So don't forget that. Is there anything else you want to share, Jackie?
I think we did good.
Okay, well, listeners, thank you once again for tuning in to listen to SB Favor Thinking Podcast. If you need to reach me, you can reach me at sbfavor@yahoo.com via email. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at sbfavor. I have a TikTok handle. You can find me over there at sbfavor. There is inspirational content there. Good stuff too. I love doing those videos. I'm not dancing. It's just inspirational content. I want to make that very, very clear. I'm also on YouTube at SB Favor. Please click like. Please leave me some feedback, and click the bell so that you can receive a notification each time there is a new episode of SB Favorite Thinking Podcast. Subscribe to the channel. Share the podcast with others. Listeners, you got to keep sharing this podcast. We are expanding. There's a lot of great things that are coming up. So please share, and subscribe. Jackie, thank you so much for being a part of this topic, my co-host. And
thank you.
Listeners, I will be talking to you soon. And I want to remind you once again, if you would like to give to the podcast, please give at $SB Favor at Cash App. I appreciate your donations. We are doing some good things soon. So thank you for your support. You have a good day.